Good afternoon, everybody, uh, and welcome to Wiland's webinar, Unlock the Future of Generosity, Fundraising Reimagined. I'd like to thank you for being here today as we discuss how to understand your existing donors better. I'm Roger Hiyama. I'm EVP of Solutions and Innovation here at Wiland, and I'd like to introduce Jennifer Honadell. Jen is Wiland's SVP of Client Success, and she manages all of our client success team. Before we get started, I'd like to just go through a few housekeeping items. Number one is the webinar is being recorded, and you should all receive a link to that recording shortly after we wrap up today. Our chat today is private, but I'll be moderating as well as Jen your comments and questions that you place in the chat, and we'll get to a Q&A at the very end. But if we're for some reason unable to answer your question or get to your question, I'll reach out to you individually with answers. If you happen to have any problems seeing or hearing any of the presenters, suggest just refreshing your browsers. If that kicks you out of the session, just go ahead and log back in immediately, and it should all work perfectly. So again, let's go ahead and get kicked off. So for the webinar today, we're going to go through really three different things. Number one is just an overall pulse of the nonprofit sector. We're going to review preliminary benchmarking from last year. And then finally, we're going to introduce a new product, a new data product called Giving Signals. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the pulse of the nonprofit sector. So I wanted to do this because I think it shapes up kind of where we're at as an industry, and talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that I think are going to exist, especially this year. I think all of us would agree that fundraising is changing to a certain degree. I talk a lot about our tipping culture and how it's when you go to a store or even checking out online and you're asked to either increase the round up to a different dollar amount, or even at the grocery store, when at the end of your checkout process you're asked to give $3 or $5 or $10 to some community fundraising program. I think those are changing fundraising. Also, without a doubt, the popularity of GoFundMe and greatergood.com are becoming more and more popular. I just this morning happened to make a gift on GoFundMe for something that was sent to me from a friend. So we know it's happening. The Generosity Crisis, if you haven't read it, is a great book that was published a year ago by Nathan Chappell, Brian Crimmins, and Michael Ashley. But within that book, early on in the book, it talks about an example of somebody who had been supporting, I believe it was Sierra Club in the book, and they were supporting them, I think it was even on a monthly basis. And what happened was that when the individual bought a Tesla, they stopped giving to Sierra Club, because their purchase of a Tesla to them meant that they were displacing that gift to Sierra Club, because their purchase of a Tesla with its electric vehicle and cleaner, no emissions, was their way of making a contribution to the world and the environment. So we know those things are happening as well. And in doing some research for another presentation, I started looking at some other things. And do you know that church attendance today is the lowest it's been since about 92 or 93? Only about 20% of people attend church on a weekly basis. And what's more interesting is, years ago there was a book published by the author's last name was Brooks. He was the brother of one of the creative guys that I worked with a long time ago. But within the research that the author did, there was a very, very high correlation with church attendance and donating. And we know today that the number of donors making gifts is below 50%, probably in the 43% range today. So we all know also about costs, and costs continue to rise. We'll get another postage increase in July. Um, there's a new thing that is happening really kind of this week. And I just learned just a few minutes ago that the proposed tariffs for Canada and Mexico might be on hold right now or delayed. But, even paper supplies, although they're stable, our price isn't going to come down because the paper market is stabilized on supply and demand. But one of the concerns is that about 60% of pulp that goes into making paper it originates from Canada. So what happens with those Canadian tariffs, if they happen at all, could be a concern. And then the other thing that we're certainly seeing is that media costs are much higher than they were during the COVID period, which is impacting DRTV digital, some CTV things as well. One of the biggest changes, I think, in the last 18 months or so is that through analysis and talking with a lot of our colleagues around the industry, we know that the number of donors that are transacting online has increased dramatically. In my particular case, I can't remember having written a check. The first problem was I couldn't find a check, the checkbook. The second problem, wow, if I could find the checkbook, where's the stamp? But now today, knowing that postage for a first class stamp is 73 cents, I know that when I think of that, I then go online, do my Google search. I'm not disciplined enough to use the URL we put in our packages. But what happens is I make my gift online. And we know that this trend is occurring because we've been monitoring matchback processes where you match the mail file to a transaction file, and you're looking for those transactions within a window of attribution period. And what we're finding is, a few years ago, that number was usually 7 to 10, maybe 11%, where you would find another 7 to 11% donations that came in through an online channel of somebody that received the direct mail piece. Today, we see that number hovering anywhere between about 25% and 35%. And we've even seen one client that had rates that were close to 40%. So imagine if you're only counting the donations that came in through a lockbox with the direct mail source code, you're probably missing out on 25 to 35% of donations, which, regardless of where they're attributed to, you need to include those at least in your analysis so that you know what media are driving conversions. We were in a conversation with one of our brokers a few weeks ago, and they were shocked when they looked at Matchback because, in particular, because we try to create audiences that are multi-channel. When they looked at the analysis of our files we provided, they were shocked that when they were able to include the attributed online gifts generated from direct mail, that many of our lists actually went break even or above. And so I just think that if you're not doing the matchback, you need to. And I don't even want to try to tackle the whole attribution thing because it's fuzzy at best, and other people are working on those kinds of issues. So I did want to spend a few minutes real quickly to just talk about some things that are happening on the legislative and government front. The first one is the universal charitable deduction. It's something that the TNPA in particular has been working, lobbying Congress on. Back in 2017 with the tax cut bill, there was a shift increasing the standard deduction and anybody then taking the standard deduction could no longer deduct charitable contributions as well. So what we've been trying to lobby Congress on is allowing for those people using the standard deduction still to be able to deduct up to $4,500 in donations for an individual, or $9,000 for a married couple filing jointly. We're not sure whether or not those are going to be included in the new tax bill, but it's highly likely that Congress will end up passing one of their two reconciliation bills to push forward the Trump tax cuts. We're uncertain if that universal charitable deduction will be included, but we hope it will. The obstacle to having it included is there will have to be some revenue offsets, which was, always the challenge in the last couple of years trying to get this passed. I will say, however, that the sponsors of the bill, it has bipartisan support. So whether or not it gets snuck through in this tax bill or not is something to watch for. And then certainly we all are aware of the executive orders and the things that have happened related to the freeze on federal grants, and also some of the USAID and elimination of USAID. Thankfully, yesterday, Supreme Court jumped in on a ruling from 5-4, uh, um, told the lower courts to go ahead and demand the payment of about $2 billion. In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing, but it certainly helps the nonprofits in question, because unbeknownst to me, I learned a couple weeks ago that a lot of the work that charities do on international aid is done up front, and then they're paid in arrears. So the ruling by the Supreme Court was to try to get the money distributed for work that had already been completed. One key thing that's happening across the states is that states are hurting for revenue. And as such, states are looking all over the place for new forms of taxation. Advertising tax, especially digital advertising taxes, are showing up in several states. There was actually a bill passed a couple of years ago in the state of Maryland, was vetoed by the Republican governor at the time, was overridden by the state house, but it's never really gone into, never been fully enacted, because it's now caught up in federal courts. So, but there are several states that are looking at advertising taxes, and more importantly, some of the trends that we're seeing now are data taxes. So anybody that touches data, including fundraisers that have not been exempted in some of these proposed bills, would be required to pay some form of a data tax. The ANA, in particular, their tax committee is really pushing against these two types of taxes, but it's something we need to be aware of moving forward. And then finally, data privacy. It's unlikely there's going to be a national data privacy legislation passed this year. And one of the challenges with that is twofold. One is a lot of the states are continuing to enact new privacy bills related to sensitive data and or sensitive health data. There's the California data delete law that will go into effect in January of 2026. And one of the concerns is, if we're able to get a national privacy bill passed, there's concern on two fronts. One is that that national standard may not supersede some of the existing state laws. And then secondarily, there's a potential for a private right of action that would allow individual citizens to sue data brokers. So the reason why I want to bring these things up, I'm going to do a shameless plug for a conference that comes next week. It's the Nonprofit Fundraisers Symposium, hosted by DMAW and the Nonprofit Alliance. There's an amazing group of speakers. There are only a handful of spots left. We've already exceeded what we did a year ago, and the content is phenomenal. So if you live in the DC area and you want to attend the conference, go online to nfssymposium.org. There's still hotel rooms available if you're wanting to come in from out of town. But I'm amazed at the group of speakers that we have, the keynoters. And one of the ones I'm especially interested in looking at is we have a demographer coming in to talk about the future of fundraising given the changing demography of the U.S. So there's my shameless plug.
Can
All
I add
right.
a shameless plug then
Sure.
for the DMFA? If you don't have funds to actually attend, if you're a DMFA member or become one for relatively inexpensively, they actually have a development fund that they will pay for nonprofits to attend for education. So across the board, if you don't have funds from your organization, you could look at the DMFA development fund to get a sponsorship or a scholarship. I saw a question did come over, Roger.
Sure.
Asked what is a matchback? I could take that, or if you want to jump in
Yeah,
on.
go ahead. Go ahead.
So you take your promotional file of everybody that you mailed, and you look at not only when you get your responders back, the responders that mailed in a check and sent it in, but you'll also look at who potentially gave online, and you typically clients will take 6 to 8 week windows post in-home dates and match back those online donations to the mail file and attribute a portion of that donation to the mailing or in whatever the rules of that organization are. So it really helps. Did the direct mail campaign drive somebody to go online and give that gift? Anything else you'd want to add to that? Or if you have any other questions on it, just let us know.
Yeah, good explanation. So we're going to go ahead and turn this over to Jen Honadell. She's going to talk about preliminary benchmarking data for 2024.
So benchmarking across the board can be tricky, especially if you're going to compare co-op to co-op benchmarking or other benchmarks out in the industry, because the participants can be different and the level of data that we receive from each of them can be different. We know we don't get everything from every single participant. We don't always get events. We mostly get mid-level, but we don't always get mega donors. DApps across the board could be hard to track. We might sometimes get a Fidelity, but we're not using that name to model from. We sometimes get sustainers. Sometimes we can't figure out who is a sustainer because they will not tag them separately because that's considered their holy grail. And many times canvassing are held back. And that's okay too, because canvassing, they're not the type of donors we want to be modeling off anyway. As some of you probably know, I've worked at a couple of co-ops, so I know the business rules about how we benchmark can be created very differently. At Wiland, we tend to cap our large gifts, and in this presentation, you'll see that we have capped some large gifts of $1,000 or plus, and in other areas, we've allowed them to flow through. And we can only use organizations with full year-over-year data assets. So if somebody one of our participants hasn't updated yet through the end of the year, or in this case, we're looking at data through November 2024, we can allow their data to come into the benchmarking. We're going to look, so again, this will be organizations that have year-over-year data through November 2024. And just a little bit so you know, if you don't know much about Wiland, we do have over 1,000 nonprofit active clients that make up the co-op. I want to highlight that we have tons of chapter-based, and when they're grouped together, they are not, individual chapters, whatever it is, Animal Shelter or Sable where I live, they are actually grouped into one chapter base. So we're talking about a significant amount of data that we're using for these benchmarks. So looking at this report, we're going to look at the year-over-year change, but then also the percentage of files. We constantly hear finding the young donor is what people are looking to do. And this data is generational. We want to look at where we're losing donors, but also where we're gaining donors. And again, it's marked up top, but we're capped at $1,000 on this slide. We see the largest change, 12-month change, is in the silent generation with 22% less donors in that older bracket. And this can be done due to a large number of reasons, whether it's natural attrition, living on a fixed income, economic concerns. One of the things I always throw out there is becoming incapable of making those decisions, and their kids or caretakers have taken over somebody's finances. But across the board, every generation is looking at donors. However, on the opposite side, you can see that Gen Z is showing positive growth in all three areas of number of donors, gifts, and they're plus 70% of revenue. But let's take a step back because we don't want to just look at that number because people will run out and be like, we need Gen Z. Look at the bottom chart. That's your percentage of file. And at this point, it's just showing that, yes, they're taking large strides, but it's less than 0.6% or of the less than 1% of the entire file falls into Gen Z. So if you look at only Gen Z, this was Roger's line and I loved it. We're running to the wrong place faster. So we go back to that silent generation. Silent generation and older boomers, age 53 plus, make up 74% of all the donors that we're seeing. And if you include those unknowns all the way over to the right, it's 89% of all donors are coming from that age 53 plus. So the question we always ask, is it a generational issue or a life stage? I would definitely say it's a life stage and not necessarily a generational. So is there any questions? Nope. Okay, so if we could flip to the next, we're actually going to look at some of the numbers. Oh, wait, did we lose a slide? Maybe not. We're going to look at the next slide, sorry, and looking at January to November 2024. And this has no cap on the generation. And you see that really that 500 plus donors, they're driving all of that high gifts. The blue bars are the number of donors and the orange represents revenue. It's going to differ across sectors and we'll walk through those quickly. But one thing is really the same, like we said, the high dollar donor is carrying the weight across the universe. So it's that 10.7% that Roger is highlighting down there. If we drop the largest drops is less than that $15 donors, but I feel organizations have purposely not been promoting to that audience since they're not going to be profitable. We know that donors tend to stay within their first gift range, and tons of studies have shown that somebody that gives a first gift $100 or more has the greatest LTV. So as an industry, we've over time, and some of the following slides will show you, we've really worked at not promoting to that under $15, under $20 gift. So the next slide is the one that actually I got confused. I thought they were going to be reversed. So my apologies for that. So you could see this is a benchmarking by donation range against 2024. So 2024 is a static at 0. Ooh, sorry.
Going back.
And you could see in 2021 there were a lot more donors in that lower gift range. We're still talking about the pandemic. You know, when we met on these slides, we're like, the pandemic activated a whole new group of givers, and we know they were donating their stimulus checks because people were in more need than they were, but that has dropped off. The other really interesting thing, what I look at is 2019. About 8 to 10 years ago, when we were talking to clients, we saw that nonprofits were really driving from heavy premium, low ask strings to more mission-based higher gift packages to drive those higher average gifts. And you can see how that really shifted over the years going into 2023 and those high gifts, which we're talking about.
So this chart's a little bit confusing, but in 2019, it would tell us that, let's take this 150 to 249, that there are actually 11% fewer in 2019 versus today, which the converse of that says there are more in 2024 than there were in 2019. But it's clear, look at all these big numbers here. There were a lot more smaller donors than there are today. And even today, from the previous charts, you can see that we're still dropping more in the lower dollar ranges, but you see a negative comparison between 24 to 23, and those are real numbers.
We've created self-fulfilling prophecy when we're modeling and segmenting to drive those higher gifts and less new donors. So we have broken out no caps across all the different sectors. So this first group is the support. So this includes the food banks, the missions, international relief. 37% of revenue is coming from the high-level gifts, so $500 plus, with 10% less overall donors. I think if we drop that out and we take out that 500 plus, that 37%, we would actually be looking at a significant negative in revenue. So, and you will see as we go through all of these slides, except for in one sector, it's a very similar pattern. So the next group we have is the religious group. And this is the one that is, oh, wait, hold on. I see Erica. Just confirming online and offline. Yes, I should have said that. So this will include any donations that the client gives us. So to be online and direct mail across the board.
Right.
So the religious affiliation, this is the only group where we'll see large movement in that middle of 25 to 499. Overall, they're flat in revenue. So they're moving from that under $25 gift relief to the 25 to 499. And this is the only area where we're seeing that kind of projection that way. Everywhere else is pretty much at that $500 plus group. So if we move on to the health market.
Oops, going the wrong way. Sorry.
You went the wrong way. No.
Yep.
The health market is when we get there is, no, you went too far. We lose the
Something,
slide?
yeah, something happened with the health one, but
All
let's
right.
go
Well,
ahead.
the health market, I can
Yeah.
tell you, I
Yeah.
remember it was down, 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 and just a slight increase of over 500, but we'll make sure it's in the final deck we get you.
Yeah.
So environmental and conservation, we had, are you seeing more organizations dropping prospecting campaigns? We are seeing organizations that are actually decreasing volume more so than dropping campaigns. Would you agree, Roger?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
We're also seeing organizations using some of our tools like optimal ask string to be able to acquire a donor at a higher gift level without impacting response rate. So we're seeing both of those. And then, we gave a presentation last week at the ANA with one of our clients, Save the Children, where they're doing very specific mid-level acquisition programs to try to acquire donors at the 250 plus range through some very different modeling that we've done with them. So we see not many people dropping campaigns, although in this crazy period of time right now, we have seen some clients pull back slightly on quantity until they figure out what some of these executive orders are how they're gonna impact their businesses. So, okay.
So environment, we're seeing a huge decline in the number of donors. Without that $500 plus, I mean, look at how that bar chart went way up, almost 18%. I think we did the math that if we take that out, we'd be down pretty, I can't remember the number now at the top of my head. Was it -4 around there?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Environmentals, they're just the ones that are passionate, they're giving high dollars. And so the next group is, I think it's animal welfare.
I believe so. Yeah.
That is animal welfare. This cohort, if you're looking at it, it seems pretty consistent and strong in getting some of those the lower to mid dollar donations. But we know, watching what our clients have been doing over the years, this group particularly went way away from the heavy premiums and into trying to drive those $25 plus gifts. I would say, looking at the numbers, this is the one that's pretty consistent across the board with like 3% of revenue, but only down 5% number of gifts. So
yeah, I also believe, in particular, the animal protection and welfare sector relies a lot on sustainer revenue, which is why you see that middle section being positive, whereas other sectors don't rely on sustainer revenue the same way.
And in the veterans was always a surprise to me, because this is the complete opposite of what we know historical veteran looks like. With these groups, they're really strong at that 75 plus gift. I remember when veterans were crazy high response rate and their ask strings started at $3 and $5. So they've done a really good job turning it around with 500 plus at that 14.4% mark. So, but again, like we've said, those high dollar donors, it's what is really, really carrying our market and our clients' markets. I think this is our last group. So a lot of conversations, like we talked about earlier, really been on what that impact of that losing those lower gift files, and what is it? Is it economic or is it changed? I said earlier, my thing is we've made a self-fulfilling prophecy. Data into model or segmentation selects really changed the makeup of these donor databases. So we're shrinking our universe, and we're all in the co-op market playing over the same names coming to the top. So it's how do we figure out how to get that incremental universe, but also how do we build on our house file to drive some of those lower gifts up. And that's where I'm going to flip it over to Roger to talk through our new product giving signals.
Great. I did want to just answer one of the questions that's in the
Oh,
chat. And the question is, are the value buckets based on HPC or annual giving? And the answer is that it's based on current giving, right? So it's on the latest gift as opposed to the largest ever. And it's a single gift, not cumulative gift within the year. And then the other question is, sustainer revenue will fall in a lower bucket than their annual total. Yes, that's correct, which is why we're looking at individual gift as opposed to cumulative within that study. So I'm happy to introduce giving signals, and it's a point in time where our benchmark data supports the work that we've been doing in developing our product. So giving signals is Wiland's new data product solution for your existing donor file. Over the last couple of years, I've been working on this project on and off for a couple of years, and we finally got great development resources freed up to be able to work on the project. And during the period where I was putting together the product, I was talking to a lot of our clients. And I would ask them questions like, we have all kinds of data resources. If we could do something to help support your house file, what kind of data elements would you like? And, and even recently in meetings over the last 2 weeks, I posed the same question. And in all cases, the questions or the comments have been very much in alignment with the product that we've developed. There are a few things that suggestions that we are not accounting for. So one of them was, gosh, I'd like to know who are premium donors versus non-premium donors. I'd love to tackle that as well, but it gets much more complicated. But I'm very happy to introduce Wiland's new data product solution called Giving Signals. So as you know, a typical fundraiser's view on your own file is what the person donated to, when, how much, the frequency. You might, if you're doing survey data, you might have some zero-party data. If you've appended some data from external resources, you might have a little bit of age data, so on and so forth. But by and large, the information is fairly limited. Well, that's where cooperative data and really all of our other data sources as well. And at Wiland, we have 3 different large components of our co-op. We have nonprofit. We're the largest nonprofit cooperative in the industry. We have publishing data, and we also have multi-channel retail, which includes traditional catalogers, e-tailers, and multi-channel retailers. But you can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, we know a lot of information, including demographic information, based on the other data that we have within our big database. So let's talk just a little bit about the types of data that's used to create giving signals. So this is an interesting chart here. On the bottom left, there are 2 axes. One is signal scarcity. So the further up you go on the y-axis, it's the availability of data. So a lot of data, not very scarce at all. The demographics, firmographic survey data, social media behavior, consumer spending data that's more aggregated. And then we have your data. But the x-axis is really this predictive value of these data variables. Transaction data is king. So when we're able to include your first-party donor transaction data, it will dwarf some of the variables that appear to the left of that. But when we aggregate your first-party donor data with the first-party data of a lot of additional nonprofits, we then get a very um, a pretty clear picture of somebody's donation activity across the entire sector. And so in the case of Giving Signals, it truly is intended to leverage your first-party data and the transactional data that's within the Cooperative database, sprinkled in with important demographic, social media, and consumer spending data to then create a group of powerful signals. And I put this disclaimer in here almost to be kind of funny, but Wiland's Giving Signals are different than other products in the market. There are a number of kind of prospect research type things, data appends that exist within the industry. And, our data is not based on whether you own a boat. I can tell you with certainty that data is sheltered so much, blocked out by some of this transactional data. And in fact, when you talk about investment in the market, they always say future performance is not, or past performance is not indicative of future performance. Well, in our case, I can tell you with near certainty that transactional data is highly predictive of future performance. And so essentially what we've done is we've taken all of Wiland's data assets, the more plentiful, less scarce to the more scarce, and really leverage the predictive value of that data. And so what do we end up with? We end up with a product called Giving Signals. So Giving Signals is a suite of products that's that maps perfectly to some of your high-touch cultivation and stewardship programs. And it's really intended to find the hidden gems, the nuggets of gold that already exist within your own database. It will be available, is available exclusively to members of the nonprofit Cooperative database. And it'll be offered on a subscription basis. So if you're not a member of the Wiland Cooperative database, in order to use this product, you would have to join and agree to provide your transactional data into the Cooperative database. We play from you have to give to get value. So only available to members of the co-op. What we're doing here is really nothing different that we've done in our acquisition modeling. We continue to use our machine learning, AI modeling capabilities, expert and proprietary data science, but instead of pointing it to prospect names, we're actually leveraging our technology, our data, and our data science and point it at house file records. And our goal was to create something that you didn't need a statistician to be able to use. So I kind of think of this as we're kind of your easy button, right? You're going to get 10 variables intended to help you both drive higher LTV within your existing donors, but also to be able to optimize contact cadence and frequency with some of the new and additional variables. Our goal is to be able to help you find those pockets of names that should be moved up into higher stewardship categories. It's those people who have the demonstrated ability through their transactional behavior to drive higher LTV. Because our goal is to fit again with variables that map directly to your existing house file programs. So let's go ahead and get into it, and we'll talk briefly about these. A house file optimal ask string, similar to what we're doing in acquisition, but it's calculated very differently. And we certainly take into account the um, the amount that somebody donates to you and your organization. But when it differs compared to what they're giving across the nonprofit sector, we want to take the ability to um, upgrade where we can without impacting retention. But we certainly don't want to take a $75 donor to you and downgrade them if their giving behavior across the rest of the sector is at a $35 level. But we believe that having an optimal ask string for your house file will allow you to gently upgrade donors without impacting retention. Um, I mentioned earlier what were the variables that most people wanted, and monthly sustainer propensity is by far the one that people wanted the most. And so this variable leverages data across our entire database, not only nonprofit transactional data, but think of subscription and continuity type things as well on the commercial side. But it's really intended to identify those donors on your file who are more likely to submit to a sustainer program. One of the variables that I was very excited to bring forth was a seasonality giving preference indicator. Over the last year and a half, we've done a lot of modeling on house files for some of our agency clients. And the agency clients would come to us and they would say, we've been working on some AI modeling internally to help with our client segmentation programs. And we started building seasonal models for these clients because they were looking at ways to optimize their programs. And the agencies came to us and they said, we want you with all your vast data resources to help us because we know we only have that fundraiser's view and you have the whole industry sector view. And what we found was seasonality is a critical variable to help you optimize cadence. There are periods of time where certain donors never give. So let's say that you're mailing somebody twice a month, as an example. By using seasonality giving indicators, if you could reduce one of those contacts, it's like found money. And in a lot of our modeling, we found that in a 20 segment model using all of our data, but specifically calling out some of the seasonality variables, that we could find 97, 98% of responders within the top 14 segments of a 20 segment model. And I think that's the power of being able to use seasonality giving as a variable as you fine tune your RFM plus, or the agencies using these variables to help augment what they're doing from a modeling perspective. Two variables that people always wanted, and we've been remiss at really leveraging this data for house files. We do this all the time when we're modeling for acquisition channels, but online responsiveness propensity. Identify those who have a history and propensity to make gifts online, multi-channel. And then secondly, the telemarketing responsive propensity. I still believe that telemarketing is one of the most effective channels when you can segment an audience that's responsive to that channel. But many people backed off of telemarketing as people dropped landlines and started using cell phones. But if you could find those people that are responsive to telemarketing, and maybe it's only 15 to 20%, you could target a program specifically to those people that are known telemarketing responsive. And we'll get into a slide in another couple that talks about combining different variables. So for example, the easy one here on this page is identifying people with a high sustainer propensity and those with telemarketing responsiveness propensity. Add those two together, and you would then try to convert donors using telemarketing. The next 5 variables are the other 10 that are part of giving signals. The first one's a share of charitable wallet. And it's a measure of really, for that individual donor, what portion of their gifts are made to you out of their entire charitable wallet. Well, wouldn't it be different if you knew that you were a big deal to a given donor and maybe you were 50% of their charitable wallet? You treat them differently and move those up to the front of the class if you knew that information. Well, that data is available through giving signals. And then, this is the other variable. The next 2 variables are the ones that everybody wanted as well. It's the mid-level and major donor propensity and their giving capacity. So these models are heavily leveraging donor transactional data, but also using some commercial purchase information plus some demographic variables. I can tell you, though, that highly leveraging known transactional data. And when I compare like our mid-level major donor product here, these 2 variables, it's very, very different than just using a wealth indicator. Well, most wealth indicators are developed using kind of hard asset scores. Do you own stock? You have a privately held company? Do you own a boat? What's the median value, or what's the home value? But it doesn't really look at transactional behavior. And this is where I'm very certain that these 2 variables, the mid-major propensity and the mid-major capacity, are going to help you identify those people that are giving at a lower level that are the hidden gems within your database. DAF propensity. Of all the variables that we have here, this one tends to utilize more demographic information, mainly because we don't get the DAF donations. When a DAF sends a gift, it comes, as Jen said, it comes from Fidelity or from Vanguard or Schwab, and it's recorded as a gift from the foundation. We don't get the soft credit when people send us their data. But this is really intended to look at the top 1 to 2% of the population that's most likely to have a donor advised fund. Demographics certainly play into this. Age plays into this certainly as well. But many organizations want to be able to tap into that huge pool of donations available from donor advised funds. I also believe as the boomers continue to age out and they're being forced to make their required minimum distributions out of their IRAs and 401ks, that they're going to do so in the form of qualified charitable deductions. And I think DAF propensity and QCDs are going to be very closely related. And then finally, plain giving propensity. So who's most likely to raise their hand to be a plain giving prospect? This variable looks at certainly giving behavior. Think loyalty, think consecutive years of giving, think about how many organizations you're supporting, things of that nature. But it also looks at demographic information as well. But being able to identify those donors who are more likely to leave you a legacy gift is something that all of our clients have desired for many years. So I mentioned that these were designed to plug into specific programs. So you can see here at the top, these are fundraising roles. And then down on the left-hand side in the blue and white are the giving signals. And then I've added 5 different demographic variables as well that are offered as an add-on package to giving signals. But you can see that based upon what somebody's job function is, certain variables, share of wallet, mid-major, and mid-major, telemarketing, these all might be of value to the plain gift officer. Whereas the digital fundraising director might only want to look at optimal ask string and online responsiveness. But you can see that giving signals is intended to unlock and identify the hidden gems for each individual existing fundraising program. And we would encourage the program managers to really leverage different variables. And just as you would in another modeling environment, these names are rank scored from best to worst. In many cases, they're alpha codes, A being the best, J being the worst. And in some cases, they are percentages or ranges of percentages. But you would cherry pick the tops of whatever variable and test them and move down through as you expand your reach into your donor base. But if you only have a certain amount of money to spend, you want to be able to identify those that are most worthy of extra cultivation expense and expenditure. And giving signals gives you that capability. So let's just talk briefly about who we recommend. So it's currently available. We recommend coding all active, recently lapsed donors. 0 to 24, possibly 0 to 36 months. When we first started talking about this, I said, you at least want to do the 0 to 12 month because you want to find the hidden gems and people that are actively donating to you today. But when I then started thinking about the lapsed and recently lapsed, well, you would try to cultivate those recently lapsed more if you knew that they had some of these higher rankings within some of these propensity variables. So if you can only afford 0 to 12, I would encourage you to do 0 to 12. But realistically, I think 0 to 24 is a pretty good sweet spot. And depending upon where and the number of records, you might want to go as far as 0 to 36 months. So how does this work? Well, the cost is based on a per record basis. You get all 10 variables for annual unlimited usage. And that full bundle of the 10 giving signals variables, plus we will refresh every 6 months. If we need to, we'll refresh on a quarterly basis. But based on some research and seeing how much these change, I think it needs to be done every 6 months. But we'll continue to look at that as we go forward. The other thing is that we want you to send your new to file records to us on a monthly basis so that we can code those and send those back to you so that the new to file records don't have to wait a year and a half to go through the standard everybody gets every mailing. And you can then identify those that may have given to you $25, but are certainly worthy of moving into other programs. Which new donor is most likely to join a sustainer program? Boom, move them there. Which person has demonstrated propensity to make a mid-level major gift, and at what level? Boom, move those up to the front of the class. And then certainly one of the things that people have always asked for is I want a little bit of demographic information to augment other things that we kind of know about our donors. And the 5 variables that have always come up are age, income, some wealth rating, presence of children, and home value, because that gives most fundraisers kind of a descriptive profile of a donor. But when you combine these demographic variables with these very significant giving signals, I think it gives you the type of data that you really need to start culling your current house file. All right. I
Roger, just
think,
want to let you know you have
yep.
like 3 minutes left. So,
All right. So the last thing is, so what does this mean from a pricing perspective? Well, there is a $1,500 minimum annual minimum. So if you have a file of 20,000 records, realistically, it's 20,000 times 15 cents. It's $3,000. If you add the demographic bundle, another $400. The refreshes come free, the new to files. You just get charged on a 15-cent basis. There are no minimums there. You do the demographic add-on for a full 12 months. And this is probably also a little bit overweighted. It's probably only 10% or 15% of the people that are going to be new to file of that 20,000. But even at 20%, that number is only $4,000. And when I talk to organizations, the cost of getting 12 months usage of giving signals is less than the cost of postage for a single mailing. So you mail somebody 15, 20 times a year at 50 to 60 cents per piece. We're going to give you the tools to identify the best people to cultivate, and it's going to cost you 15 cents. And that's why we put together giving signals, because we wanted to leverage all of our data assets to help you raise additional funds. And based on the benchmarks that we showed you earlier, you can certainly see that it is the higher end of the file that's really carrying all the water right now. And when you then look at that generational chart, my gosh, we're losing people to of the silent generation faster than we can bring them in at other areas. So having a tool like this, I think, will really help jumpstart a lot of your cultivation and stewardship efforts. So that's it. I didn't leave enough time for questions.
I was just looking at some of the questions, and I think you might have answered most of them anyway. The only one that you didn't answer was, if we have a second, is can these models help identify prospects for CGAs?
So one of the things that I'm planning to do is every year to add 3 to 5 additional variables. CGA is one of them because more retirees are looking to bonds and things of that nature that give them some guaranteed income. That's more of a financial instrument than it is a fundraising instrument. So looking at necessarily donor transactional behavior may not be the right variable, but that's one of them that I would like to add. There are other variables that I plan to add as well, including more detailed looks at charitable wallet and number of organizations they support within the co-op, and variables like that that would then give you additional data to help qualify names. Okay. You will all receive this deck. But the way to get started, contact your Wiland Client Success Director. It will require the signing of an agreement outlining data usage and the deletion when your subscription lapses. You'll identify which portion of your file you want to send to us. And you'll want to make sure you include the donor record ID, so you have something to append back to your CRM. You'll want to specify whether you want giving signals and the optional demographic bundle or only giving signals, and then we'll turn that around quickly. 5 to 7 days. And once we send it to you, take those variables, update it into your CRM, and it's easy to append back to your file and immediately actionable. So that is giving signals. Your client success director, if you've signed up for the webinar, will be sending you additional information after the webinar. And if you want the opportunity to have a one-on-one meeting with us, contact your client success director. We'll set up Zoom meetings to answer any and all questions that you may have. But we think that this is a product that has been long overdue from a Wiland perspective. And we also know that it varies significantly from other products that people are offering in the marketplace. Jen, any other questions or comments before I?
So yes, it was this webinar recorded? So yes, that was recorded. I think the rest of them you pretty much answered. Somebody asked about timing, most recent donors. I think as you went, I was listening. Oh, he touched on that. I knew things were. I think we're good. And if not, we'll reach out to you individually because we have the questions.
Yes.
So.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
I do want to let you know that our next webinar is going to include a guest speaker on major donor fundraising and really more about the organization and management of major gift departments, caseloads, things of that nature. That webinar will be coming up in early to mid-April. And thank you very much.
Thank you.